السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وكفى، سلام على عباده الذين اصطفى، أما بعد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وهو معكم أينما كنتم والله بما تعملون بصير. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Welcome to the 9th Daily Quran Gems hosted by Masjid Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Alhamdulillah, it is only by the tawfiq of Allah SWT that He allows us to gather here every day, and we should be grateful to Him for this opportunity to learn about His deen and the Sunnah of His Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And as Allah SWT mentions, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, if you are to be grateful to me, I shall increase you. So may Allah SWT allow us to increase in our benefit from these sessions and allow us to attend further sessions. Ameen Ya Rabbil Alameen. Last time we were discussing this idea of the fact that dhikr is a protection against shaitan. Dhikr is like a fortress that protects you against shaitan. If you are performing dhikr, if you are in a state of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shaitan cannot affect you, cannot do his job. So we mentioned in this ayah, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم استحوذ عليهم الشيطان فأنساهم ذكر الله أولئك حزب الشيطان ألا إن حزب الشيطان هم الخاسرون. That shaitan overcame them and he made them forget the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we mentioned last time, the moment that you overcome your enemy, you want to try to take away their most powerful weapon that they can use against you. For example, if a man is using a gun and you're taking a self-defense class, they will tell you, try to take away his gun, try to knock the gun out of his hand, try to do something with the gun, because that is the most powerful weapon that they can use against you. So the most powerful weapon that a mu'min can use against shaitan is to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first thing that shaitan does when he overcomes a person is that he takes away the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He makes them heedless. When a person becomes heedless, they become unprotected. And when they become unprotected, then shaitan can launch whatever attack he wants. He can take them in whatever direction he wants. He can basically play with them. He can toy with them. So let us make sure that we are always in a state of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we are feeling attacks of shaitan upon us, we are getting evil thoughts, we are getting evil impulses to do something, then we should, number one, say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. In another place in the Quran it says, وَقُلْ رَبِّ أَعُوذُ بِكَ مِنْ هَمَزَاتِ الشَّيَاطِينِ وَأَعُوذُ بِكَ رَبِّ أَنْ يَحْضُرُونَ in Surah Al-Mu'min, Surah Al-Mu'minun, I believe. So this is explicitly mentioned in a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that he quotes from Zakaria alayhi salam regarding the commandments that Zakaria alayhi salam told his people. In that, he mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands them to do the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, and he commands you to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for indeed the parable of that is the man whose enemy quickly tracks him. So like a man is running away from his enemy and the enemy is running after him until he reaches an impermeable fortress in which he protects himself from them. But he enters into a fortress and now they cannot attack him. This is how the worshipper is, and he does not protect himself from shaitan except by the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we want protection from Allah, from shaitan, it behooves us to do the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at all times. Now, I want you to imagine that you're driving in a car and you're going somewhere merrily on your way, and all of a sudden you see these lights flashing behind you, right? You see these flashing red and blue lights. What do you do immediately when you see those lights? hopefully you say inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, right? And you slow down, you check your speed, you press the brake pad, your foot immediately gets off the accelerator, it goes onto the brake pad. You check if your lights are on, you check if your kids are all in their car seat, you check that you're not doing anything illegal, right? Because there's a cop right behind you, perhaps he wants to pull you over, or maybe if you're lucky, he's chasing somebody else. You just happen to be in the way, and you ask protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you say inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, right? So what happened? Your awareness that there is a cop behind you, that there is a police officer behind you in a car, changed the way that you're driving. It changed the way that you're driving. It forced you to make sure that you're not doing anything illegal. It forced you to make sure your kids are in your car seat, you're not going over the speed limit, your lights are on, everything is in check. Why? Because you're conscious of the fact that the police officer is behind you and he could potentially do something about this illegal activity that might be going on. So the same way, the believer who becomes conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who becomes always aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's always remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the fact that he's with him, also changes his life. The way you change your driving because of the police officer, the believer, because of his consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala watching him, changes his life. He makes sure he's not doing anything illegal, quote unquote, haram. He makes sure that he's always in check. He keeps everything real. He keeps everything halal. And he makes it even better if possible. So this is how dhikr allows you to protect yourself from your nafs as well. Right? So shaitan obviously runs away from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But on top of that, your second enemy, which is your own nafs, your own, I guess Freudian id, if you want to call it, that part of your makeup, which the Islamic scholars of spirituality call the nafs, the one that has all these desires for the opposite gender and for eating excessively and drinking and sleeping, etc. Your lower self, your base self, the part that we share with animals. The animals do those things as well. They reproduce, they eat, they drink, and they sleep. Your lower self has these desires that you need to be able to curtail in order to follow the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be completely halal. You can also be protected from the whisperings of your own nafs and your own evil desires by being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How? Because you will essentially know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you and that he could seize you at any moment, the same way the cop could pull you over at any moment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even more so to the nth degree, it knows everything about you. You cannot make any excuses, and he can seize you at any given moment for anything that you do or even think. Much more than any police officer could. You could potentially lie or deceive the police officer. You can never lie or deceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You could potentially, quote unquote, run away from the police officer, not recommended, but you can never run away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can punish you in many different ways that you can never even imagine. So the believer, when he does the dhikr of Allah, he makes sure his line of thought, and make sure his actions are completely halal. And this is essentially ihsan, right? Ihsan is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see him. And if you cannot see him, if you cannot attain this level, then you must consider that he is looking at you. You must know the fact that he's looking at you, which is the fact that you're aware that he's watching, the same way the police officer is watching. And if you think about when was it that I fell into sin, most likely at the moment that you fell into a sin, you forgot. You were heedless of the fact that Allah SWT is watching you. It becomes very hard to sin when you know that Allah SWT is watching you. The same way it becomes very hard to do something illegal when the cop is right behind you. Right? In the Quran, in fact, this is one of the lessons in terms of the spiritual path, which is to sit and just contemplate over this part of this verse. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He is with you, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wherever you are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you wherever you are. So sitting there for 30 minutes, 1 hour, this is one of the advanced lessons. When you sit and you ponder over this idea, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, and He is with you wherever you are, there comes a point when you are unable to forget that fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you at all times. And therefore you enter that beautiful state where it becomes very difficult to sin. Okay, so number one, since you're conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're doing dhikr, you get protected from shaitan to a large degree. And then number two, since you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching, and it's more clear to you than even blue lights flashing behind you, and you have full yaqeen and you're convinced of it, of all times, it's like no one can convince you otherwise. You could never even forget this fact. The same way that you can't forget the fact that you exist, or the fact that you have a hand or a nose. It becomes that obvious, then it becomes very difficult to sin as well. So these are some of the benefits of being in a state of remembrance and achieving these advanced states of ihsan. And we call this the معية of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact that you understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to reach these beautiful states. May He allow us to perform dhikr of Him at all times. May He allow us to save ourselves from heedlessness and from falling into the traps of shaitan and nas. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاك الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.